Carved into the walls of Algeria's remote mountains lies a 12,000-year archive of ancient African life that reveals the Sahara Desert was once a lush paradise teeming with hippos, elephants, and sophisticated human societies. What if I told you that the world's largest desert was once a Garden of Eden where hippos wallowed in vast lakes, elephants roamed through grasslands, and ancient African artists created the world's greatest outdoor museum? Hidden in the remote mountains of Algeria and Libya are over 15,000 rock paintings and engravings that chronicle 12,000 years of human creativity, telling the story of Africa's lost paradise and the remarkable people who called it home. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from and how the weather is treating you today. I love connecting with our African folklore archives family across the globe. Most people believe the Sahara has always been the vast, empty desert we see today. The conventional wisdom suggests this barren landscape has remained unchanged for millennia, a natural barrier that separated North Africa from the rest of the continent. But what if everything we know about the Sahara is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of Africa's climatic history? What if I told you that just 7,000 years ago, the Sahara was a lush savanna where crocodiles sunned themselves on riverbanks, giraffes browsed acacia trees, and sophisticated African societies flourished along networks of rivers and lakes that connected West Africa to the Mediterranean? And what if the proof of this lost world wasn't buried in archaeological sites, but painted on cave walls for anyone with eyes to see? In this video, I'm taking you on a journey through time to explore the Saharan rock art that dates back 12,000 years, revealing Africa's hidden history preserved in stone. We'll discover how these ancient masterpieces document the greatest climate transformation in human history, explore the sophisticated societies that created them, and uncover why this treasure trove of African heritage remains largely unknown to the world. By the end, you'll understand why these cave paintings represent one of humanity's most important historical records, and why they change everything we thought we knew about ancient Africa. The evidence is carved and painted on thousands of rock faces across Algeria, Libya, Niger, and Chad, authenticated by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site and verified by decades of scientific research using the most advanced dating techniques available. Our story begins in 1910 when a German explorer named Heinrich Barth, crossing the desert to reach Timbuktu, stumbled upon something that challenged everything Europeans believed about African history. There, carved into remote cliff faces in the Tassili mountains of Algeria, were thousands of images showing a world that shouldn't exist. Elephants, rhinos, hippos, crocodiles, and giraffes roaming through what is now one of Earth's most barren landscapes. But it wasn't until the 1930s and 1960s that systematic exploration revealed the true scope of this discovery. French archaeologists led by Henri Lotte found not just scattered images, but an entire gallery spanning over 72,000 square kilometers, containing more than 15,000 paintings and engravings that chronicle human life across 12,000 years of continuous occupation. The Tassili Plateau sits in a strange lunar landscape of great geological interest, but hidden within its cliff faces and rock shelters lies what experts now call the greatest museum of prehistoric art in the world. These aren't crude scratches or simple drawings. These are sophisticated artistic compositions created by skilled artists working with complex pigments and advanced techniques across thousands of years. The oldest art belongs to what archaeologists call the large wild fauna period, dating from 12,000 to 6,000 years ago. During this era, Saharan hunter-gatherer societies first made rock art, creating images that included animals that then lived in the area. Hippos, rhinos, elephants, giraffes, the extinct giant buffalo called bubulus, aurochs, and large antelopes. Many of those animals no longer exist anywhere in the Sahara, providing undeniable evidence of dramatic environmental change. What strikes me most about these early paintings is their extraordinary realism and attention to detail. These ancient African artists weren't creating abstract symbols or simplified representations. They were documenting their world with the precision of naturalists, showing us exactly what life looked like in the Green Sahara 12,000 years ago. What topic baffles you the most about African history? Drop it in the comments below. and I'll research it for my next video. Your curiosity drives the content on this channel. But here's where the story becomes truly remarkable. These paintings don't just show us what animals lived in the ancient Sahara. They show us sophisticated human societies that developed complex relationships with their environment across thousands of years. The art documents the transition from hunting and gathering to pastoralism, from nomadic life to settled communities, and from survival to cultural sophistication. Archaeological evidence confirms that human occupation, in the form of hunter-gatherer groups, occurred between 10,000 and 7,500 years ago. These weren't primitive societies struggling for survival. These were sophisticated peoples who had the time, resources, and cultural development necessary to create lasting art. They understood pigment chemistry, artistic composition, and symbolic representation in ways that rival any civilization in human history. The technical skill demonstrated in these ancient masterpieces is breathtaking. The artists prepared pigments from ochre, charcoal, and various minerals to create a full palette of colors. They understood how to work with the natural contours of rock faces to create three-dimensional effects. They developed techniques for creating both paintings and engravings that would survive for millennia in harsh desert conditions. Consider what this level of artistic achievement tells us about these ancient African societies. Art of this sophistication requires social stability, specialized knowledge, and cultural continuity across generations. It requires communities prosperous enough to support artists, wise enough to value cultural expression, and organized enough to maintain artistic traditions for thousands of years. The environmental story told by these paintings is equally fascinating. Paleoclimate evidence confirms that 11,000 to 5,000 years ago, the Earth's slow orbital wobble transformed today's Sahara Desert into a land covered with vegetation and lakes. This was the African Humid period, when monsoon rains turned the Sahara into a savanna landscape dotted with rivers, lakes, and grasslands. Rock art discovered around 1850 provides proof for this green Sahara, showing giraffes, elephants, hippos, antelopes, and others typical of the savanna of Central Africa. These weren't imaginary creatures or mythological beasts. These were real animals living in the Sahara when it was a completely different world than what we see today. The paintings chronicle this environmental transformation in real time. Early images show large wild animals in abundance, reflecting a time when the Sahara teemed with life. Later paintings document the transition to pastoralism as the climate began to change, and people adapted by domesticating cattle, sheep, and goats. Like, comment, and subscribe to support this channel. Your subscription means the world to me, as African Folklore Archives is still growing, and every subscriber helps us reach more people hungry for authentic African stories and history. Around 7,000 years ago, the inhabitants of the region began herding cattle, and as they searched for pastures, they left rock paintings across the desert documenting the origins of domestication. The cattle often have decorated bodies and wear pendant necklaces, showing that these weren't just livestock but valuable companions with cultural significance. This pastoral period, roughly 7,000 to 4,000 years ago, represents one of the most remarkable chapters in human history. As the climate gradually became drier, African societies didn't simply collapse or abandon the region. They adapted, innovated, and continued to thrive. They developed mobile pastoralism, learned to follow seasonal rains, and maintained sophisticated social networks across vast distances. The rock art from this period shows us something extraordinary: the development of what may be the world's first pastoral civilization. These paintings depict not just cattle but entire pastoral societies with complex social structures, specialized roles, and rich cultural traditions. We see ceremonies, dances, elaborate costumes, and social gatherings that reveal communities with developed spiritual and artistic lives. But perhaps most remarkably, we see the development of African identity and consciousness. Many paintings show people with distinctly African features, wearing traditional African clothing and ornaments, engaged in activities that connect directly to later African cultures. These aren't anonymous primitive peoples. These are our ancestors, creating sophisticated art that documents their lives, their beliefs, and their achievements. The artistic techniques developed during this period influenced African art for millennia to come. The use of ochre pigments, the stylistic approaches to representing human and animal forms, and the integration of art with landscape and environment. All of these became defining characteristics of African artistic traditions that continue to this day. Around 4,500 years ago, the Sahara began to resemble the landscape we see today as the African humid period ended and the desert expansion began. But even this environmental catastrophe is documented in the rock art, showing how African societies continue to adapt and survive even as their world fundamentally changed. The later periods of Saharan rock art show the arrival of horses, then camels, documenting the technological innovations that allowed people to continue living in an increasingly arid environment. We see the development of trans-Saharan trade routes, the emergence of complex societies, and the continued flowering of African creativity even under challenging environmental conditions. What makes the Saharan rock art truly unique is its scope and continuity. This isn't just a collection of ancient paintings. It's a 12,000-year visual history of human adaptation, creativity, and resilience. No other place on Earth preserves such a complete record of human cultural development across such an enormous time span. The site includes the whole of the Tassili mountain range in Algeria, as well as connected sites in Libya's Akakis Mountains, creating a cultural landscape that spans hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. From a cultural perspective, it ranks as the premier rock art site anywhere in the world, home to more prehistoric art than anywhere else on the planet. Yet despite its global significance, the Saharan rock art remains largely unknown outside academic circles. Most people have never heard of Tassili, despite it being one of Africa's most important UNESCO World Heritage Sites. This remarkable archive of African heritage has been overshadowed by more famous archaeological discoveries, leaving one of humanity's greatest artistic achievements hidden in the desert. The preservation challenges facing these sites are enormous. Climate change, tourism, and natural erosion threaten these irreplaceable records of African history. Many paintings that survived for 12,000 years are now fading rapidly due to changing environmental conditions and human impact. But the scientific value of these sites continues to grow as new technologies allow researchers to discover details invisible to previous generations. Advanced imaging techniques reveal hidden layers of paint, allowing scientists to understand how these artworks were created, modified, and maintained across centuries of continuous use. Recent discoveries continue to push back the timeline for sophisticated human behavior in Africa. The rock art shows evidence of advanced social organization, spiritual beliefs, technological innovation, and cultural continuity that challenges every assumption about ancient African capabilities. Comment below and let me know which part of this story intrigued you most. Was it discovering that the Sahara was once a lush paradise? The incredible artistic skill of these ancient African creators? The 12,000-year timeline that makes this older than Stonehenge? Or the way these paintings document humanity's adaptation to massive climate change? The human figures depicted in the Saharan rock art reveal sophisticated understanding of anatomy, movement, and expression. These aren't stick figures or primitive representations. These are carefully observed portraits of real people engaged in real activities, created by artists who understood proportion, perspective, and artistic composition. Many paintings show elaborate ceremonies and rituals, providing insights into the spiritual lives of ancient African societies. We see masked dancers, ritual gatherings, and symbolic representations that connect to later African religious and cultural traditions. These images reveal that spirituality and artistic expression were central to these societies from their earliest periods. The social organization depicted in these paintings is equally remarkable. We see evidence of specialized roles, hierarchical structures, and complex community relationships. Some figures wear elaborate costumes and ornaments that suggest leadership roles or special status. Others are shown engaged in specific activities like hunting, herding, or craft production. The artistic traditions documented in the Saharan rock art had profound influence on later African civilizations. The symbolic systems, the artistic techniques, and the cultural values expressed in these ancient paintings can be traced through Egyptian art, Nubian culture, West African traditions, and contemporary African artistic expression. This continuity of African cultural development, spanning from 12,000 years ago to the present, challenges narratives that portray African civilization as static or primitive. The Saharan rock art proves that Africa has always been at the forefront of human cultural development, creating sophisticated artistic traditions that influenced the entire continent. The environmental lessons embedded in these paintings are particularly relevant today, as we face our own climate challenges. The Saharan rock art documents how human societies adapted to massive environmental change, showing both successful strategies and the consequences of ecological transformation. These ancient African societies developed sustainable relationships with their environment, creating pastoralism systems that allowed them to thrive for thousands of years, even as conditions became more challenging. Their experience offers insights into resilience, adaptation, and sustainable development that remain relevant today. The global significance of the Saharan rock art extends far beyond Africa. These paintings document universal human experiences, the development of art, the relationship between people and environment, and the evolution of technology and social organization. They show us that creativity, spirituality, and cultural expression are fundamental human characteristics that transcend time and geography. Yet the African context of these achievements often gets overlooked in discussions of human cultural development. The Saharan rock art proves that Africa was not just the birthplace of anatomically modern humans, but also the birthplace of behaviorally modern humans with fully developed artistic and cultural capabilities. The preservation of these sites for 12,000 years represents an extraordinary achievement in itself. The artists who created these works developed techniques and chose locations that allowed their creations to survive ice ages, climate changes, and the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Today, the Saharan rock art faces new threats from modern development, tourism, and climate change. Many sites remain difficult to access, protecting them from casual damage, but also limiting opportunities for study and appreciation. Balancing preservation with accessibility remains one of the major challenges facing these irreplaceable cultural treasures. The story of the Saharan rock art is ultimately a story about African greatness, human creativity, and the power of art to preserve history across millennia. These paintings remind us that our ancestors were not primitive survivors struggling against nature, but sophisticated people with rich cultural lives, advanced artistic abilities, and deep spiritual connections to their world. They challenge us to reconsider our assumptions about ancient Africa and to recognize the continent's central role in human cultural development. They prove that creativity, innovation, and artistic achievement have been part of the African story from the very beginning of human civilization. As we face our own environmental and social challenges, the wisdom preserved in these ancient paintings offers both inspiration and practical guidance. These African societies showed us that humans can adapt to dramatic change while maintaining cultural continuity, that art and creativity remain essential even during difficult times, and that sustainable relationships with our environment are both possible and necessary. The 12,000-year archive carved into the mountains of Algeria and Libya stands as a testament to African genius, human resilience, and the enduring power of art to connect us across time. These paintings don't just document the past, they speak to our present and inspire our future. In our continuing exploration of Africa's hidden histories, We'll discover more treasures that challenge conventional narratives and celebrate the continent's extraordinary contributions to human civilization. The Saharan rock art reminds us that Africa has always been home to humanity's greatest achievements, from our species' first steps to its highest artistic expressions, preserved in stone for those with eyes to see and hearts to understand.